You thought I wasn't reading, but I was. I'm back with the book review, and it is actually religious text. I read the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra, and these are considered the two of the few most important scriptures in Buddhist philosophy. And I would like to talk about the contents of the Diamond Sutra first. So, a little bit about Buddha. Um, he was born into royal blood and, ruled over stuff, rich, affluent, has all the resources and everything, got a wife and kid. Everything's good, but not really, because Buddha is also a human being. So, along with being a human being, comes a lot of mind drama about things. So he decides to venture outside of the palace. What's out there in the real world? Let me find out. And then he sees a lot of people suffering and struggling. And Buddha is like, you know what? I want to figure this stuff out. I'm, of course, greatly simplifying Buddha's life. But anyway, he decides to renounce everything that he has and seeks the truth. And why do we suffer? Like, what's the reasoning behind this? Let's try and figure this out. And at first, he realizes that, you know what? My life has been too full of comfort. Everything was provided to me, and yet I still suffered. So maybe the truth itself is in suffering. So he sought out these teachers who were specializing in suffering, and he spent 6 years in suffering and pure torment. Like I think I'm not completely sure, but like the based on my limited knowledge, well, he does like hanging upside down, like bed of nails, and just constant meditation for like hours and such, and so tough on the body. And but the rationale is maybe this will completely clear my mind because I'm committed to suffering itself. But after 6 years of this, he realizes that this also doesn't really resolve everything. It just sucks. So if you're watching the video episode, video version of this episode, I'm having a image of the Buddhas. Basically, there's a statue that displays what the suffering phase looks like, and he's basically all like very little flesh, all bones, and basically he's meditating, and this is more or less the image that Buddha has when he is completely in suffering. So he tried both. He tried full comfort and full suffering, and he finds that neither contains the answers. And so he starts walking the path of the midway. So truth is not found in comfort. Truth is not found solely in suffering. So there must be a midway, and this midway is typically in the form of a paradox. So when you look at Buddhist philosophy, you're gonna find that there's a lot of paradox, and the Diamond Sutra is no exception. Diamond Sutra contains so many paradoxes that are very mind-boggling, and they're for good reason. So before we get to the Diamond Sutra, after Buddha reached awakening, in the after he had gone through both versions of lifestyles, extreme lifestyles, he's dedicated his whole life to teaching others about the wisdom of being awakened. Because turns out when you're awakened, you realize, oh, I don't suffer. Why? Because I've transcended it all? No, not really. It's that when you awaken and you truly get to see the world from a completely detached and neutral angle, you just find that there simply isn't anything to be upset about. There simply isn't something that deserves my frustration and struggle. So when we suffer, there's always a reason behind it, right? Like I suffer because blah blah blah. I don't have enough money. I hate my job. My wife hates me, and my husband is leaving me. My kids aren't listening to me. My family got murdered. I got into a car accident. So there's always this concrete thing that is believed to cause the suffering. And awakening is actually realizing that it doesn't exist. Now, the physical like behaviors, the physical phenomenon could have happened, but me interpreting that as something to be suffering worthy is a process of the mind and it has no substance to it. So when you take away all the things that cause you suffering, you realize there's nothing inherently worth suffering for. So that's what's different about the awakening in terms of a religious kind of a goal, right? Like, oh, you're gonna be happy when you go into the afterlife if you go to heaven. You're gonna be happy when you achieve all of those things. And Buddhism is more about life itself. When you're having a really good time and you have everything you want, what could be more heaven than that? But at the same time, because that happiness is dependent on things that bring you joy and happiness, when those things turn the other way, what worse hell is there? So, Buddhist teachings are all about heaven and hell are reincarnations. They just repeat over and over. And true awakening is when you can detach from that cycle of reincarnation and realize there's nothing that is inherently worthy of heaven. There's nothing inherently worthy of hell. So you are at this sort of like Zen place. Zen is a word that came much later, but true neutrality where everything just is. And truly integrating that and realizing that and being able to apply that truth to everything in life, that is the ultimate goal of being an awakened person. And now Buddha wanted to spread this and not just keep him to himself, keep this knowledge to himself. And so he spent the rest of his life living as a monk and giving his wisdom to all who sought it. Buddha didn't really wasn't like, hey guys, I'm really smart and I have all this thing figured out. Come check it out. No, he just lent an ear to someone who wanted to talk and gave something to them back in return. And so one of the famous Buddha quotes is like, "Don't stop those who come and don't stop those who go." And that was basically his principle as he lived the rest of his life educating others on giving them the experience of being awakened. And now, through that process, he talked to a lot of different people, and of course, like all religious figures, he had disciples. And through his conversations with his disciples, many of them recorded them, and for that recording of the conversations with Buddha and his students, in a textual format and kind of formalized is the Buddhist scriptures. And because Buddha did this so much for the remainder of his life after his awakening, this meant there's a lot of scriptures. But there are very few core ones that we consider to be very encompassing of many of the different aspects of Buddhist philosophy. And the two of them that I will discuss is the Diamond Sutra and the Heart Sutra. Now, I learned this in Korean because I study Buddhism in Korean, and that's why the book is probably not going to, the book that I've read is probably not going to be available in English, but that is the book. Diamond Sutra is predominantly about the phenomenon of image. And the image is basically when something happens in the world, we observe it. That phenomenon that happened becomes part of our knowledge and experience by sensory organs. I see something happening, I hear something happening, and I taste, I smell, I feel things happening, and then I think of things happening. So the thing that happens can be something that happens inside of your mind as well. When you notice yourself having a thought, that's a thought process, right? And so something happens in the world. Now, as we internalize that, we don't exactly see things the way they are. For example, I am looking at my camera as I am talking to you about the Diamond Sutra. But the thing is, my field of vision contains so many other things, but I'm temporarily blinding them and choosing to focus on the camera. There's lots of other sounds that are going on in my room. There's ambient noise, and there's my computer fan, and my dogs are breathing next to me, and I'm talking to you, but I'm choosing to notice the silence because it helps me concentrate. And so repeat that all for all the senses, and you realize that your sensory organs are doing its job and giving it to your brain, but your brain has a way of filtering them and reprocessing them so that it highlights certain things and it dulls other things. And now that process starts to repeat itself over and over, and it starts to form kind of a pattern that is useful for you, um, or it becomes a pattern that you latch onto to avoid, or whatever. This grand pattern is what is called the image. And now when you attach to the image and start casting judgments and opinions about the image of things, instead of looking through that, oh, this was an image, and the actual world and the actual things are not like this, that is a way of attaining awakening. And now, these images, they help you live life, because if you truly didn't have any filters for your sensory organs, you would probably go insane because there's too much information overload, right? And so I think I spoke a little bit about sensory overload in my emails in the past, but like when so many things are happening at once, your sensory organs become overwhelmed and your brain just kind of shuts down. So it's a preventative mechanism. So it's good. It serves us, and it benefits our human nature. But now psychological problems start forming because we attach to our images. And so Diamond Sutra is all about the conversation between Buddha and his student about, okay, so the concept of image is easy to explain. I just explained it to you. And so Buddha says, so don't form images and look at things and where they are, especially when you're suffering and everything feels like it sucks, and you can be happy. So for example, I'm not making enough money. Enough money is an image, right? I'm not making is an image, right? So when you notice all the images that are being formed with your problematic state, and you detach all those images and just see the things that they are, and that's how you get to a neutral state. That's how you kind of awaken, and you're okay, and you free yourself from suffering. But Diamond Sutra is actually goes more than that, because that in and of itself is simple. Diamond Sutra asks the student in question with the Diamond Sutra asks, like, Buddha, we know that, awakening and everything is good, and now I want to know. I have this knowledge, and I want to be like you. I want to live the noble life. I want to be cool like you. So I want to be like a good person, right? And I want to be a positive figure, and I want to achieve all these great things. I want to attain nirvana. How do I do that? And so Diamond Sutra is about, how do I live a best practice life? And basically Buddha continuing to tell you, even that is an image. Living a good life is also an image. So Buddha keeps on saying, I can give you all these teachings, but the moment I think that I am providing you with knowledge and it helps your life, the moment I start thinking that, it loses its grand purpose. And now I'm attached to my image. Therefore, if you don't behave the way I want to with my teachings, I'm going to start to feel disappointed. And so I'm not doing good in the world because I'm trying to fulfill my selfish needs. So true good in the world comes from you not even engaging in good activities. True good doesn't come from willful donations because now you're like, I donated, I'm a good person. But what if they don't accept your gratitude? Like, what if they're not happy that you donated? Then you donated supposedly for good, but you'll be disappointed and you'll think that the other person is ungrateful. So you realize that you're fulfilling your own selfish needs, and that is no different from trying to be like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk. I'm gonna be so rich, and because I'm so attached to my thing, everything needs to make me money, me. So even noble things, even things that are good for the world, when you start believing that these are good things and that you're doing it, it starts defeating the whole purpose. So much of the dialogue goes like, but what if I did this without attachment? But the Buddha keeps on saying, the moment you recognize that I'm doing this without attachment, that's also an attachment to detachment. So how do you get to true detachment? And that's where the paradoxes come in, right? It's a truly selfless state where you forget that you exist. And when you give your heart without lingering to anything, that is the ideal. So translate that into kind of realistic, real world, meaning is that, when you're so hyper focused on something and you kind of lose all the sense of time and being and everything, when your heart is being poured out like that, that is the state that we want to do things with. But we get into that zone and then we realize like, oh crap, I don't have enough time. Oh crap, I'm late for something. Oh crap, I'm hungry, and so on. And life keeps on bringing us back from that detached state, which is weird because that detached state is kind of the maximum of an attached state. So that's why these paradoxes are so important, right? Like you can attain this state of no self with association and dissociation. But the key point is to do it without consciousness. So it's a very complicated topic and it's realistically very difficult to do. And that is why Buddhist philosophy, when you want to practice it, is usually accompanied by physical challenges that invite you to overcome it by just simply losing yourself. I regularly meditate for 30 minutes these days, and it's hard. It took a very long time for me to not comfortably, kind of like regularly hit 30 minutes in meditation because the mind drives me crazy. But the thing is, every few minutes or so, there's a moment where I can find myself just like completely focused on my breath, and that's it, nothing else. And partly I think that's because I'm so used to hypnosis, and that trance unconscious state is kind of like that. Sometimes I'm mid meditation and then something calls my attention from the outside. So throughout my meditation, I'm thinking that I'm already conscious. I'm not unconscious right now. But the thing is, when the external stimulus starts calling me, I realize I was really deep in trance, but I was awake. So, in a sense, that state where you reach meditation with, and that state where you're kind of forgetting yourself is very similar to the unconscious experience under hypnosis. So that is my grand oversimplification of the Diamond Sutra. And it contains so much wisdom that I skipped over and significantly paraphrased over. So if you want to seek more wisdom from this, I would highly recommend getting your version of the Diamond Sutra, preferably with an interpretation um, from a monk or a practicing person who knows what the sutra is primarily about. Because to be completely honest, I talk a lot about Buddhist philosophy, but I'm only beginning to really get into the deep weeds of Buddhist philosophy. And I'll be learning more about them in the upcoming year, but that's the state of my Buddhist philosophy now. Okay, so that was the Diamond Sutra, and now we have the Heart Sutra. These names are kind of symbolic of what the scripture says. So the Diamond Sutra why is it diamond? It's because diamond is the hardest solid material, right? So your suffering, it can be really dense and really hard. But the thing is, when it meets the diamond, it'll shatter because nothing is stronger than diamond. So the Diamond Sutra actually means the diamond that can cut through suffering, the diamond that can shatter suffering. And that is how powerful the idea of detachment and non attachment is. So that is why the Diamond Sutra is called the Diamond Sutra. Now, the Heart Sutra, I personally think, is a misnomer. Heart Sutra's full name is Paramilda Banya Shimgyong, and it's actually Mahabanya Paramilda Shimgyong, and it actually transliterated from Pali and Sanskrit into Chinese into Korean. That's what I just said. But the what it literally means is a scripture that is core to the infinite knowledge and awakening, right? So I really think that this should be called Infinite Sutra because that's what the this actually I think is about. But the core part got translated into heart because they share the same symbol. And so that's why it's called the Heart Sutra. Now, Heart Sutra is about denying everything in Buddhist philosophy. And that can be really confusing at first. So I just gave you this whole spiel about how our sensory organs work and how we form images and how we're born, we grow old and such. But now the Heart Sutra is actually really short, and 90% of the sutra is starts with such a thing doesn't exist. So it says life doesn't exist, death, destruction doesn't exist, increase doesn't exist, decrease doesn't exist, and perception doesn't exist, sight doesn't exist, hearing doesn't exist, thinking doesn't exist, consciousness doesn't exist, and suffering doesn't. So like it's all these teachings that tell you that the Buddhist philosophy tells you the Heart Sutra is just a collection of denouncing all of them. And now, what the heck, right? So that's why this sutra is so profound. Now, whenever we have an important text, whenever we have an important idea, there's more or less two ways to deal with it. Number one is to look at the conservative way of looking at it. So, for example, the American Constitution. This is strangely where I first learned about this concept. We have the Constitution. There are historians and there are policymakers and there are people who take the Constitution by the word. And Constitution was written in in some time period with some historical context, but then ignoring all of that, what's written is the most important, and that's it. And on the other hand, there are more people with relaxed interpretations of it. You know what? Like Constitution when it was written at this time when they said this, it usually meant this. When they said that, it probably meant that. So times have changed. We need to adapt it to our times. And that kind of argument goes on even to this day, right? This happens with the Bible. This happens with, like Muslims. This happens with everything. So Buddha saw through this. Buddha saw through the fact that, okay, I said a lot of things, and now there will be people who fight to tooth and nail about taking my words extremely literally, and there will be people who want to be too liberal with what I say. So Buddha basically rejects all the teachings that he gave before because he doesn't want you to believe that the truth is in the text, that the awakening is in the form of these ideas. True awakening is detachment from images. And Buddha realizes that even his teachings have the potential to be images. And so what he's saying is true awakening transcends what he says. True awakening transcends perception. True awakening transcends our interpretation and our systems of knowledge about things. And the only thing that this sutra does not actively reject is the three core elements of existence: impermanence, suffering, and non-existent, non-existence. These three are just how it is. So the more you understand that these three things are fundamental truth and therefore everything is void, none of the teachings in any of the scriptures matter. What's important and what's at stake is recognition that everything is impermanent and nothing has a specific will that has to be enforced, and nothing sort of exists. Everything is just something bound in space, and that something is again something bound in space, and again that something is also something bound in space. The more you recognize this, and the more you recognize that everything is just up to interpretation, but in its core it's void, doesn't exist. Everything just is. And that is what the Heart Sutra teaches you. Don't get obsessed with the words, don't get obsessed with the ideas, don't get obsessed with awakening itself. And that is how you attain true enlightenment. But then Diamond Sutra again says, oh, I attained true enlightenment. The moment you say that, the moment you're not attaining awakening, because true awakening comes from not even being aware that you are awakened. Again, lots of paradoxes. So let's talk about briefly about the three core elements, because suffering part seems kind of arbitrary. So impermanence. What is impermanence? Impermanence tells us that nothing is like permanent. No state is permanent. Ice eventually melts into something else. Because what about Antarctica? Well, guess what? Planets also are born and die. So Earth will die one day. And that's just how it is, right? And when that happens, there is no more Earth. So we, in history and in like biological history, we know a lot of things that existed but now don't, right? So a lot of animals went extinct, and a lot of fauna and a lot of like rock formations that used to be available in the Earth don't exist because nothing is permanent. everything undergoes change. But the thing is, because of that, because nothing is permanent, when you look at that a little bit, like that thing also doesn't exist. So, for example, Earth right now to us exists because we are mistaken. We are taking a very short slice of time in its infinitude and defining what Earth is, and we think that it's always going to be around, and Earth is just this thing that always is around and will be forever and has been forever. But that's not the case. When Earth is gone, and million years later, after the Earth is gone, maybe there will be another life form, but they will have no idea whether Earth is there or not. And to be completely fair, we're kind of like that right now, right? We don't know any alien life forms. We don't know what happened before Earth. Like, where were we, right? So, you realize that impermanence and non-existent go hand in hand. Because, okay, but the Earth is here right now. Where did that come from? It came from the formation of stars. And formation of stars is like some matter that was suspended in space kind of collided and then started forming an energy relationship with another thing. And then that relationship became more like encased, and then it started forming a relationship with another encased thing, and so on. And then it started having reactions and physical tendencies that made it explode energy, which caused another chain effect, and then bunch of cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect, which is why again Buddhist philosophy focuses so much on cause and effect. And so I have a hand. My hand is composed of skin and a bunch of cells. My skin has cells, and the cells have cellular structure, and the cellular structure is composed of like mitochondria and like plasma, and those things are also composed of something else, right? And then you go down and down and down and down, and then you have amino acid, and the amino acids and blah blah blah, and it's like elements. Elements are composed of atoms. Atoms are composed of electrons, protons, neutrons. Are they? I don't know. I'm a little old on my chemistry knowledge, but even electrons is something smaller than that. So we think electron is a thing, but then that thing is just a bunch of things suspended in space. So you go down one more level, and then even that thing is another thing suspended in space. Bunch of stuff suspended in space. So, aha, there's that stuff. But then even that is like a bunch of stuff suspended in space. And ad infinitum, right? So the more you look into things and try to define one like atomic matter, the more you recognize it doesn't exist. It's just another space bound by like it's just another bunch of things bound by space. And it just goes on this way, inside and smaller. And it goes up too, right? We have the Earth, we have our solar system. Solar system is part of the Milky Way, and there's a galaxy, and there's a universe, and there's multiple universes, and it's exactly the same. That concept works both ways, up and down. So how suffering fits into this is we suffer because things we don't go our way. Therefore, there is no will. There's no greater will that gets imparted. There is nothing that dictates that Earth is to be formed at this space and time. This is why life is unpredictable. Because there's nothing imparting a will onto us. There's nothing imparting will into our existence, which is again composed of nothingness. And because of that, human beings suffer because obviously we want things to go our way. So there's no will, universal will. Nothing is and not everything changes. This fundamental truth repeated over and over and over and over again why Buddhist philosophy focuses so much on reincarnation and repetition. It's this infinite paradoxical cycle of that three core marks of existence. And the Heart Sutra is saying everything beyond that can help you reach the understanding of this, but that itself is not the awakening. So that has been my review of the Heart Sutra and the Diamond Sutra and my kind of overview on Buddhist philosophy 101. And this is not the type of book you read once and get over with. So the more I study Buddhist philosophy this year, the more I will be rereading this to integrate more of this knowledge into my life. And if I get more knowledge that I want to share with you, I will definitely do so in future videos and future episodes of this podcast. Well, that's it for this podcast episode, and I want to thank you for listening and your support, as always. I'll see you in the next one.